How many times I got to tell you, Terry, you don't tell me anything. I'm the man, and as long as I'm your man, you'll stay in a bitch's place. She tried another approach. I know you're the man, Teddy, but you use the car as much as I do, and you know it's in my daddy's name. She hated the whining sound in her voice. If I don't come up with some money this week, he's going to take the car away from me until I show him I know how to pay my bills. Use your paycheck, bitch, he replied facetiously. You get a check every week? Pimp hard, nigga, pimp hard, Tim said loudly from the back. Terry remained silent the rest of the trip. She was consumed with blind anger. All right, big shot, she told herself coldly. Just have your fun. Every day ain't the same, and I bet I'll be around to see better days than this. He pulled into a motel and parked beside Snake's old car. We might as well go in your joint and split up the skag, Teddy said. Snake opened the car door and got out. You might as well come in, Terry, since we gonna be a while. He grinned and held the door open for her. As she climbed out, he stared straight in her eyes. It was all there for a man to see. The handwriting was on the wall. Teddy had oversported his hand. That's the last thing I want is another dope fiend, she thought, as she saw the look in his eye. He took her arm and led her towards the motel. Teddy, watching the little byplay, smiled. He was too confident in his hold on Terry to distrust her. They had been together so long, he'd begun to think he controlled her completely. Snake opened the door, and they all marched in. They sat around and shot up their shares of the dope, while Terry snorted the pile Teddy had given her. When everyone was finished, Snake got up to leave. If it's cool with you, Snake, me and Terry will lay up a while. I still got some stuff, so I'll lock up when we get finished. Just don't mess up my sheets, Snake said, and led his friends out of the motel room. After they left, Teddy pulled his clothes off and sprawled out on the bed in his shorts. Take that shit off, Terry. Ain't no sense in you getting it wrinkled up before we leave, he ordered. As she slowly undressed, she watched him measure out 2 piles of heroin from the 4th of dope he had. He made one small pile and held it out towards her. She could feel her eyelids growing heavy from the earlier drug. Is it all right if I take that home for in the morning, Teddy? She asked sweetly. If I want you to have something for in the morning, I'll give it to you. If you don't want this, just say so. I can just as easy put it in my cooker. He stared at her coldly as she removed the last of her clothes. Take them panties and bra off, too. She hesitated briefly. I'll keep this, Teddy, she replied, moving the small pile of dope out of his reach. She stretched out on the bed and set the dope on the nightstand. She wiggled out of her panties and twisted around so he could unsnap her bra. This would be the last time Teddy would have a chance to do anything to or for her, she told herself coldly. She gritted her teeth. It had already become an unpleasant task. Teddy cooked his dope and shot it up before turning to her. He ran his fingers slowly down her body, starting at her neck, and followed the path his finger took with light kisses. She lay beside him passively. When he drew his head back up and kissed her, he found her lips cold and unresisting. Her coldness aroused his anger, so he mounted her with the intention of riding her roughly, but he couldn't get a hard up. The heroin had taken effect. He lay between her legs and moved slowly. His hips rotated in a grinding motion. He continued until he believed he had an erection. He reached down and tried to force his limp penis inside her. She remained still, as though she were a corpse. For a moment, he nodded, the strong drug taking effect. He allowed his head to drop between her tits. Her stillness aroused his anger further. He began to run his tongue down over her body intimately. Before he could perform cunnilingus on her, she squeezed her legs together. "Bitch, open your goddamn legs," he ordered. She shook her head angrily. "You ain't about to do nothing like that to me, Teddy," she replied sharply. "If you'd act more like a woman than a fucking piece of wood, it wouldn't be necessary," he yelled. He climbed back up. "I know what you need," he said, and sat up on her chest, with his penis aimed at her mouth. She twisted her face to the side, trying to avoid being forced into an act of fellatio. Teddy slapped her viciously across the face. "Open your goddamn mouth, bitch!" he yelled. "If you force me," she replied, her voice muffled by the pillow, "I promise you one thing, Teddy. When I get through, you won't ever stick it in anyone else's mouth because I'm going to bite that motherfucker off." "Bite it off!" he screamed, and slapped her ruthlessly. "I'll teach you to tell me what you're going to do." She screamed and jumped from the bed. Terry covered her head as he punched at her face. He hit her twice on the neck and a couple of times on the top of the head, but she managed to avoid any facial blows. "Get the fuck out of my eyesight, dope fiend-ass bitch!" he yelled, beside himself. "When a bitch gets so sorry she can't even make a man get his dick hard, she ain't no use." His anger was directed more at himself than at Terry. To cover his shame at not being able to function as a young man should, he exploded in a blind rage. Terry grabbed her clothes and ran into the bathroom, locking the door. After she dressed, she waited a few moments before coming out, and when she re-entered the bedroom, Teddy was busy shooting dope. She stared at him coldly. There was really no anger over what had happened. She was too happy that it had ended. She knew that this was really the end. "I need the keys to my car, Teddy," she said, as she opened the door leading to the street. "I ain't giving you nothing," Teddy replied slowly, nodding all the time. She stared at him silently for a minute. "I know you ain't crazy, Teddy. Ain't no way for you to take that car and get away with it. When I go home and tell my father what happened, he ain't gonna hardly come out in the streets looking for you. All he gonna do is call the police station and report it stolen. Do you want that to happen?" she asked as a last resort. "You done took my money tonight, Teddy. What else do you want to take? My father's car, too?" He didn't reply. He just continued to sit on the bed, nodding. She eased back in the room and picked up his pants. She found the key in his pocket. She felt some money, but was too frightened to take it. She slowly backed out of the room. Terry slammed the door behind her and ran to her car. She locked both doors after jumping in and rolled up all the windows. She didn't begin to breathe easier until she drove away from the motel. She debated with herself as to whether or not she should go get Billy, but decided to be thankful the affair hadn't ended any worse than it had. 7. Teddy sat in the front seat of the car, staring out of the window. He was in a black mood. Things had changed for the worse these past 2 weeks. He silently cursed the night he'd been so high he'd forgotten how nice it was to have the use of Terry's car. He also felt the loss of the $10 and $20 bills he used to take for granted every time she got paid. Actually, he believed it hadn't really been his fault. The real problem was that Terry had gotten strung out, and that was the reason she had quit him. He had told himself this so often that he had actually come to believe it. Snake grinned as he glanced around at Teddy. He knew just what was eating at him. "I gotta sell for some record albums, if we can get some," he said to no one in particular. "That tight son of a bitch who owns the record shop on the east side said he would give us $2 apiece for every new record we bring him." The group in the car rode on in silence. All of them were dope fiends, and all of them were looking for something to steal. There were 4 of them in the car, and all of them had the same thought racing through their minds. They all needed a fix. Dirty Red, sitting in the back seat with Tim, spoke up. "I got a sale for 2 lawnmowers that ain't got to be new." He added, "Just as long as they run on gas, we got a sale." They were just beginning a morning of hustling, and the first thing they had to get together on was what did their customers want. All of them had regular customers, to whom they sold hot articles every day, and many of their customers requested certain items. Almost any good thieving addict will follow this policy, because if he knows what he can sell and where he can sell it, he'll save a lot of time. People ordered anything from a good dope fiend, anything from a bedsheet up through stoves and refrigerators. Tiny Tim, a short, stocky, dark-skinned addict, spoke up. "I need 25 steaks and 2 hams for Miss B. She says she's having a party this weekend and she needs the stuff so she can make some money off of a dinner. She paying half price, and it's cash money." "What about you, Teddy?" Snake asked, turning sideways to glance at his silent partner. "You know what I need," he replied coldly. "I still got the same customer waiting on that portable TV, but it don't look like we're going to come up with it." "I don't see nothing wrong with your arms or legs," Dirty Red said harshly. "They got television sitting down in the basement of Sears. but I ain't seen you walk in there yet and come out with one. Shit, Snake, Tim said. Your sister got a nice one sitting in her bedroom. It would be a hell of a lot easier ripping that one off than walking out of one of these stores with one. Your mammy got one sitting downstairs in her house, too, only it just ain't colored, Snake replied loudly, with no apparent anger.